Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. It is time for another episode of the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I am your host, Craig Fahle. Glad to have you with me today. And I would like to welcome my esteemed colleagues and guests today. Allan and co-founder of Deadline Detroit is with us. Thank you, Allan. Glad to have you back.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm coming back from a little surgery, knee surgery, so that explains why I'm sitting here in bed. So,
well, and I have a feeling you're going to be there for a few weeks, so
yeah.
We'll have to make sure that we stop by and bring you snacks and all that good stuff.
More snacks.
My Deadline Detroit colleague Nancy Derringer is here with me right now. Thank you. I'm getting my Nancy's mixed up here. Nancy Kaffer of the Detroit Free Press editorial board is with us again today. Thank you very much.
Knock on wood.
And joining us for the first time on this show, but not the first time on my show, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. Of course, he is a physician. He is an author, former candidate for governor here in the state of Michigan. Thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate it very much.
Honored to be with you guys.
All right. Well, and before we get started, I do want to thank the sponsor of this program. Keep this in mind, everybody. This election, you have important choices to make, huge choices to make up and down the ballot. Of course, besides the presidential contest, we've got decisions to make on statewide offices, ballot proposals, local races. Michigan Radio and NPR can help. They give you accurate information and nuanced perspectives on the issues. Unlike this show, of course. It is your state, your vote. Be informed with Michigan Radio, Michigan's NPR news leader, and you can find out more at michiganradio.org. So thanks to Michigan Radio for sponsoring this program at Deadline Detroit. It's a big deal. Got a lot of friends over at that place, and they do fantastic work. So really, really, very cool. All right, everybody, let's get going this week because I'm glad to have Dr. El-Sayed on the program today because the COVID numbers we are seeing right now, despite what the president is telling us, that basically it's going to be gone. Don Jr. yesterday said deaths are nothing. There's not there. And there's actual discussion about whether or not a herd immunity strategy is something that this administration wants to move forward with. Doctor, I'm going to start with you on this one. 90,000 cases yesterday. We set another record. It was just 80,000 the day before was the record. So 10,000 more today alone. This is an alarming spike. And we talked about a second wave. It certainly seems as if that wave is cresting right now.
That's right. When the story of COVID-19 is finally told, they're going to be talking about this wave. It's the same thing that happened, unfortunately, with the last serious great pandemic that we had back in 1918, is you saw a pretty big wave in the spring, and then it dissipated a little bit in the summer, and then it crested in the fall and winter months. And that's driven by the fact that people are going indoors now, and the kinds of things that make a life, right? People going back to college and people going back to school. That all of those are a recipe for a terrible spread, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And I want folks to appreciate that this time around is going to be worse for a couple of reasons. It's not just people going indoors, but COVID-19 is everywhere, right? That first spike that we saw in March and April and May, it was in major cities where it had entered from abroad. Now, over the summer, it has spread to every corner of the country, and now it is everywhere. And so as you're getting more spread everywhere, you're getting a lot more caseload. And it's only a matter of time until, unfortunately, that turns into hospitalizations and deaths, because now you're seeing COVID cases in a number of hospitals where you had not seen the same number of cases. And if those hospitals get to a point where they're overflowing and you cannot care for folks, that is the recipe for high levels of unfortunately, mortality to this disease. And so herd immunity is not going to solve it. That is a non-strategy. It is a fancy way of talking about why you failed to actually take on a real pandemic. And they're calling it some kind of scientific strategy. It's not. And the fact that we have not had the kind of leadership that we needed at the federal level, it shows. And unfortunately, potentially hundreds of thousands more people could die because of it.
Well, go ahead, Nancy.
Can I ask one question here? Do we even know if herd immunity is a thing with this disease yet?
So traditionally what herd immunity is, just to explain it, it's the notion that imagine all of you have immunity, whether you acquired it because you got the disease and now have antibodies, or you acquired it because there's a vaccination. If all of you are immune and I'm not, I'm in effect immune because I can't get it from you because you're immune. That's how herd immunity operates. And the idea is that if we allow enough people to get the disease, then they're going to acquire immunity because they have antibodies to the disease. And for that reason, right, those folks who have not gotten it are more protected because of that. The problem, though, is that when you basically say, let's let the virus rip among a whole number of people, right? Number one, it's almost impossible to really protect all of the folks who are the most at risk of very serious outcomes. And number two, a lot of those folks who aren't at risk of very serious outcomes still get the disease and have a very serious outcome because, of course, we've got story after story of young people that we all know who've gotten the disease and died. And so this is a non-strategy. And then to your point, right, what we're starting to find is that the immunity that we get, the natural immunity that somebody might get after having gotten the disease, fades over time. And so we don't actually, there are cases now where people have gotten the disease twice. And so all of that means is that, we may not have the same kind of potential for herd immunity that the Trump administration seems to want to believe into existence.
Well, and it's Nancy, you looked like you wanted to say something, Nancy Kaffer.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the spike that's happening right now. And the fact that here in the city of Detroit, our test positivity rate remains pretty low, 2.2% the last time I looked, which is like less than half the state rate, which is like up in the above 6%, right? And I think about what's different here and what's happening even in the suburbs of Detroit or in the rest of Wayne County. And so Detroit got hit hard very early, and we all lost someone that we know or close to, even if not a member of our own family, someone in our circle. And a lot of people lost family members. And so I think people here, all that loss, people took it seriously very early. People have been very compliant. When you go around in the city, people wear masks, people do distancing, people aren't crowding up on each other compared to like things that I see when I do go to the suburbs or what other friends report from the suburbs. But the other piece that I think that's important is we have unanimity of messaging from the leaders. There is no prominent figure in Detroit who's urging not to wear masks or not to take it seriously. And then we had accessible testing very early. I can't speak to our contact tracing program particularly. Maybe Abdul might have more insight on that. I know that contact tracing has kind of maybe been not as well executed across the state as maybe we wished it had. But when I think about the things that, and it's all like anecdotal. It's like, well, how can you say that Detroit is doing compliance better? It's like, well, we have a 2.2% positivity rate, and that is coming from somewhere. And I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's those three things: is understanding the severity, which hit Detroit hard at first; compliance, unanimity which leads to compliance, which is also impacted by unanimity of messaging from leaders, and that is so heartbreaking to me because any community can have those things. Take it seriously. Unified message from leaders. Well, this is not expensive. This is not hard to obtain. These are things that people could do if they had the will. But in Macomb County, in other counties, you have different leaders, not at the county level necessarily. In Oakland County, obviously, Dave Coulter's been very good in his response. But nationally, and at the state level, you have almost like pick your opinion. You have people. It's heartbreaking to realize.
Well, I mean, we have a potential super spreader event happening just right now. I mean, President Trump is in Waterford Township. I was looking at the footage on television before we went live. There's nobody wearing masks there. Basically, this man is creating super spreader events all across the country right now in complete just denial of science. And it's so frustrating for me to watch this because I now live in Oakland County. I do not want to have to worry about walking outside of my house and whether or not some joker that I'm going to run into at the store down the street was at this stupid super spreader event. I mean, this is it's dumb. I have my Halloween costume. This is my Halloween costume. I'm going as a responsible adult this year.
Wow. And I will say
something different.
I criticize Wayne County and Detroit leaders a lot, and I want to say they got it right on this. The messaging was right. The response was right. Like they did right here. So
go ahead.
I mean,
it may not be a mistake that there are fewer Trump supporters in Detroit, and therefore we're seeing more compliance.
Sure. We're more receptive. I mean, we're a more politically homogenous group here. There's not a push-pull like there are in more politically diverse communities where you may be open to, nobody here is buying the Trump line.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, that the website, the Trump campaign's website actually made the claim the other day as one of the accomplishments of this administration. And I do that. You can see it, everybody, air quotes. One of the accomplishments is they defeated the coronavirus. They actually put that on their website the other day as one of the things that they have accomplished. And I'm like, okay, 90,000 cases yesterday, 80,000 the day before. I'm trying to figure out who would be willing to believe this at this point in time. I cannot fathom what's going on in people's minds where they think that we've got this taken care of.
But I do want to reiterate, though, that the Trump messaging is obviously really problematic. But in Detroit, our state lawmakers, our county officials, there is no prominent person in Detroit who's giving whereas in Oakland County and Macomb County, you have state legislators, it's the local leadership. I think, we can't do really anything about, we can vote on Tuesday about the Trump administration, but we don't have a way to influence those the way we do our local elected officials. And we have, our state Senate Majority Leader and our state House Speaker are not providing the right leadership here. They're questioning whether we need common sense public health mandates. They're, equating the common sense health mandates given by Governor Whitmer in executive orders with horrible government tyranny. So, this is not let's drub on the Trump administration all you want, but there's also some real accountability here at the state level, at the county level,
Don't disagree. Anybody that's looking at this as a political issue as opposed to a public health issue is doing it wrong.
I agree with that. I also wonder, you think about these, the thing about the Shirkies of the world and the Chatfields of the world is it's not that they are leading per se. It's just that they're lemmings. And all they're doing is parroting what they're seeing out of the Trump administration. You could imagine a world where you go back in time and Donald Trump is not president, and you look at what a Shirky or a Chatfield says about COVID-19, and it's a lot more consistent with the science. The challenge here is that, honestly, thinking forward, if God willing, inshallah, we can say that now, right? Because it's a whole meme. So inshallah, if Joe Biden wins, right? You gotta wonder what the Republican Party does in terms of pivoting. And I'm waiting for these Chatfields and these Shirkies to pivot on a dime when they realize that they have just gotten walloped, right, in an election up and down Michigan because, well, they massively mishandled the worst public health crisis in 100 years. And I bet, right, if this happens, I bet, right, you turn around and these folks are like, well, we've been right with the science all along. We've understood that these are really important issues to take on, and we agree that we need to do something about the virus. The fact is that they have not had an independent voice, independent of Donald Trump, for a long time, and he sort of polarized his party and forced them either to come with, right, or risk, facing a primary in whatever part of Michigan you're talking about.
One of Abdul's many wonderful qualities is that he's an optimist.
Well, hey, look, let's talk a little bit about this. Donald Trump is here today. Obviously, Michigan is a very, very important state for both of these candidates. Winning Michigan is, you pretty much have to do it if you want to win this election, especially if you're Donald Trump. But tomorrow we've got Joe Biden is going to be here with Barack Obama. We did not see a lot of Hillary Clinton in 2016 in the state of Michigan. A lot of people suggest that her inattention to the state cost her, again, 10,000 votes is what the margin was, which is very, very small. Do you think that they're paying enough attention to Michigan? Are they taking it seriously enough? And does that make a difference to people, do you think?
I think, it's interesting. The crowds, Obama with these car rallies and stuff like that, they can't match the crowds that Trump is getting. But the idea that they're coming to the state creates a certain level of excitement. And I think that's really important to people. I think I was trying to look yesterday, and I think the last time Hillary came in 2016 was October 16th or something like that.
And it was a fundraiser.
Yeah, and then she did a little fundraising and she did a rally at Wayne State, but she didn't get it. And I think people love the attention. And when you give the state the attention, I think people really respond to it. So.
Well, I've never run for office. I know, Doctor, you have. And, you know a little bit about retail campaigning and getting out there and pressing the flesh and doing all this kind of stuff. What are your thoughts on the way that the Biden campaign has handled Michigan so far?
Yeah, I'll say three things. When I ran, right, we had raucous rallies, right, in the thousands. And it turns out that when someone votes, whether they're voting, holding their nose and barely bubbling in, or they're voting with like the enthusiasm, it's still the same vote. And so enthusiasm doesn't vote. And I want folks to remember that these elections are sometimes not about the enthusiasm of deep partisans, but about the judgment of folks who aren't going to wear their political opinions on their sleeve. The second point is to say that, so much of the Biden message is about how Trump has mishandled this virus and the implications it has had for the beings and doings of a daily life. And so, they would undercut themselves if they were campaigning the same way that Donald Trump is campaigning, because it's inconsistent with the message. And then the last point is just that, if you choose to believe in science, which I guess is a thing you have to do these days, then, you have to take seriously the risk that your decisions have for people that are going to be coming out. And the Biden administration has said that, we are willing to forego all of the retail politics that we otherwise would be doing, because we know that that's a dangerous thing to do right now, which of course is the responsible thing to do. And right now, I think people are just voting on whether or not they think their potential president is a responsible steward of the public good. And that being said, right, on Saturday, you've got both Joe Biden and Barack Obama coming to Michigan, right? And that is, it's not that, if that's not bringing in the heavies, I don't know what is. And Senator Harris has been here several times. So they're not taking the state for granted, but they're doing it in a way that is respectful of the science and recognizing of the fact that that this is going to be won through a call to honesty, a belief in that science, and a recognition of what a failed presidency has done to our society.
So Joe Biden wasn't my first choice, or probably my second, but he's actually really good at this stuff. The first time he came here, he was getting, I forget where he went. He went somewhere north of the city, and he was getting some flack for not coming to the city. And was he going to ignore Black voters in Detroit and make the same mistake? And then next thing, like my Facebook feed is inundated with pictures of Joe Biden. He popped up on the Avenue of Fashion. He's buying souvenirs for his grandkids. I mean, he's good at this. Like, this is his deal. He's not a policy visionary. He's not, even like a wonk or whatever. I mean, he's good at people. Like, even the debates last year, you would see other candidates were leaving the stage, and he's working the edge of the stage, taking, crowd selfies with people. Like, he seems to genuinely like people, genuinely like talking to them, and genuinely understand how to reach people, which are like qualities humans should have, and I think would be nice to have in our presidency. But I mean, he's good at. He may have never won a presidential election that he tried, or primary that he's tried before, but he's held office for a pretty long time, and seems to know what he's about when he's campaigning.
What was interesting to me, though, I mean, of course, they've been trying to paint Joe Biden. The Trump campaign has been trying to paint Joe Biden as, senile. The way that they've handled the pandemic, I'm not yet a senior citizen, but I'm on my way there right now. And it certainly seems to me as if Donald Trump is doing everything in his power to piss off old people right now. You look at the numbers. Nancy, go ahead.
Not only that, he's pissing off old people right now, but this whole, to set the bar at, my opponent is, has Alzheimer's and doesn't, can't find his way to the bathroom, is ridiculous, because all Biden has to do is just be better than that and show that he isn't senile. I mean, I saw a clip of him last summer. He was riding a bicycle. Just riding a bicycle.
Imagine Donald Trump on a bicycle. Can you picture it?
Exactly. Can you imagine that hard ass on a bike? Come on. Anyway,
the two attacks that they're lobbing is, number one, that he's senile, and like Nancy said, all he's got to do is show up, and then it's like, duh, he's not. And the other one, that he's a radical left winger, which I think Abdul has some thoughts on. Probably, it's like these are perplexing attacks, because part of what worked in 2016 was saying that Hillary Clinton was essentially a Republican and that self-respecting left-wingers should stay home. Like that was a successful attack. So why are we going the provably untrue route of Joe Biden as an Antifa left-wing radical progressive, which is, I'm sure some voters would be much happier if that were true.
And the senility message, but at the same time, they're trying to peddle this story that he's some sort of a criminal mastermind at the same time.
Right.
So, this is
well,
the thing.
Like Hillary was incompetent and unfit to be president, and is but she's also a mastermind who has rigged literally everything and gotten away with murder. But Clinton managed to rig the election, which was the one thing she really needed to have been able to. There's no consistency.
Go ahead, Allan.
I find interesting is that Trump is accusing Joe Biden, the family of being a criminal enterprise. I mean, I don't know why during the debate, Biden didn't turn to him and say, I'm not the one under criminal investigation in the federal and state level in the state of New York. I'm not the one who had a foundation that was fraudulent and was shut down. I'm not the one who ran a university. I mean, it's just crazy, the projection, and it works among his base. The messaging gets through when people say, what has Joe Biden done in 47 years? I mean, these blanket statements, and you'll hear people say that.
Yeah.
And the one I saw Rona McDaniel or whatever. She was on Facebook.
Formerly Romney, yes.
Yeah, I think a couple of weeks ago. And the Republicans ignore questions on TV, and they're just all about the messaging. She was asked a question. She said, well, I think the big thing is the Democrats are going to load up the courts. And so then they say, okay, well, let's go on to the next question. And she goes, and the next question gets asked, and she just goes, no, I think the most important thing is that the Democrats are going to load up the courts.
Which the Republicans have already done, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's
to the point there,
that
if you want to know the list of Donald Trump's unfittedness for office, look at all of the attacks he lobs, right? Every single one applies probably better to him than it actually does to Joe Biden. And
right.
the other part of this is that there is, I think you're right, a really thoughtful approach that they put in to just jamming their message down your throat. And I just think that, when we think about what needs to get done in the next 4 years, if Joe Biden is elected, there's going to need to be a lot more focus on just taking the ball and moving it down the field, just like Republicans have done for the last 4 years. And, a lot of us on the left, right, as progressives, we wish that Joe Biden was a little bit more of a tool of the progressive left. That'd be great, right? Get Medicare for all and pass a Green New Deal and have free college. The fact is that he's been rather independently minded. The other part of this, though, is that he has the potential, if he is to win, again, inshallah, don't want to be too optimistic here. If he is to win, to potentially have one of the most the largest mandates in U.S. history to actually get things done for the next 2 years, right? Because if he wins, you've got how many Senate races that are up that could potentially flip, and there's a real potential to drive forward. The fact is, though, is that it will be Joe Biden steering the ship, and there is no way to push back against that. I mean, his ability to have come out of the primary in the way that he did suggests that, as Nancy said, he's really quite good at this.
Nancy Derringer.
Well, I don't want to pivot away from that, but something that Abdul said just stuck with me when he said he's going to have a mandate. And I was struck yesterday reading the story in the Detroit News about the polling that they did and discovered that an enormous margin, I think it's like 78% of those voted or of those polled, including Democrats, Republicans, and gun owners, believe that guns should not be, open carry should not be permitted in polling places or in the state capitol. Okay. We were talking earlier about Shirky and Chatfield.
Sure.
To look at their priorities, you would think this is the most important issue facing Michigan today. And when, nearly 80% of a fairly decent sample are saying, no, it's not, be reasonable, quit carrying water for, the gun industry, you would think it was starting to dawn on them at some point. Because I have a feeling that whatever happens next week, I have a feeling that Abdul is right. We're going to see blood up and down the ballot, and they're going to have to figure it out. What we think?
I disagree with you, because particularly on the gun issue, for a long time, Michiganders poll consistent with everybody in the country. Michiganders support, the South and the Southwest are a little bit off, but Michiganders support sensible gun reform legislation, closing the gun show loophole, red flag legislation, more, not having guns in certain types of places, universal background checks, that types of thing. The polling is consistent, and it has been for years. I did a column on this one time. I compared the attitudes of most Michiganders toward gun reform legislation with the gun legislation that comes out of Lansing. And Michiganders consistently say that we support I think what most people refer to as common sense gun legislation, not taking your guns, not registering all gun owners, not even banning types of weapons, certainly nothing like the right-wing specter of gun confiscation, which they like to trot out, even though literally no one's doing that. But this is years that Michiganders support gun reform legislation, and we don't see that coming out of the GOP in Lansing. We see the consistently expanding gun rights, making it widening the criteria for brandishing so that you can't be charged with brandishing for walking around carrying a gun, widening, trying to eliminate a school or a church's ability to say that you can't bring a gun here. So they haven't gotten it till now. And I would be great to think that they'll get it. I don't know that that's going to happen.
I don't think I said that they're going to get it. I just said they are madly out of step with the average.
Yes.
Well, this is what scares me a little bit. We had 2 more arrests yesterday of a couple of terrorists, basically domestic terrorists here in the state of Michigan, people that had some violent fantasies about what they want to do here. And part of me is like, great, crack down on these nut jobs. Absolutely. But that also creates that sort of Ruby Ridge situation where you get that pushback from people that then say that, hey, they're taking away our rights to assemble. They're taking away our rights to our guns. But the fact is, we do need to take these people seriously. And I worry that there's then this sort of pushback from the gun people that suggests that this is somehow infringing on our rights. And the debate gets all screwed up every time we do this. The federal government and ATF needs to crack down on this stuff, but I worry about a pushback. Go ahead, Allan.
I was going to say, it's interesting. I mean, when I was at the Detroit News, I covered the Oklahoma bombing, and I spent a lot of time in the slum. I was there every week for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the militias got on the map, and the domestic terrorism and all that became very a high priority for the FBI. And then 2001 came, and it vanished. It just sort of got pushed aside for a long time, and it sort of has resurfaced slowly. But now it's at the forefront again. So
yeah,
I'll tell you,
go ahead.
I was a junior in high school in 2001. And I went from being a darkly complexioned kid with a funny name to being a very particular kind of darkly complexioned kid with a very particular kind of funny name. And for the rest of my life, I knew that if I were traveling or I was frankly on the street, that the presumption of my guilt in association because of my name, because of my faith, would follow me everywhere I went. And, I really appreciate you, Craig, for calling this what it is, which is terrorism, right? Because for too long in our country, for most of my adult life, terrorism has been equated with a very particular group of people who look like me and pray like I do. And I think we need to make sure that we are talking about this kind of terrorism in the same way, so we don't make the mistake of continuing to perpetuate the notion that terrorism can only be carried out by a group of people, right? It's not domestic terrorism; it's just terrorism, right? And we got to call it what it is. And then the other point here is just a recognition of the cost of inaction and the cost of inattention when we don't pay attention to what real threats are, because we carry a very racialized view of who can or can't be dangerous in a particular society. And I'm glad that this is bringing up this conversation. I wish it didn't take a threat against the governor's life and her family. But it is important that we focus on the consequences, because I'll also say this. How many times have we seen these kinds of terrorists target Black churches or communities of color, and we don't call them out? But the time that we're finally calling them out is because they're targeting another white person. And so I just want us to be very thoughtful about the way that race shapes the conversation that we have about this kind of organized violence.
Also, I want to just add, they targeted women's health centers too, and a lot of times that white women use those centers as well. And violence is not as we even see this in the response to the threat against Governor Whitmer, is that some of our leaders are equating it with, well, she had issued some executive orders, so maybe it's legit. It's violence against women is put into the special box of maybe we kind of deserved it. So that is. I agree with everything you said, Abdul. I just wanted to add on that women are included in a group. It doesn't matter.
We've got to move on a little bit just because, we have to save time for Schmuck of the Week a little bit later on. But somebody who was actually going to be a nominee of mine, but I decided it needed its own segment, is this very, very strange dog ate my homework story from Tucker Carlson at Fox News. I don't know if anybody's been following this, but apparently Tucker had some very, very important documents showing off, all this corruption by Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and how he was going to be beholden to the Chinese if he gets in office. And UPS apparently took the package. He says he didn't have any copies. The only copies he had somehow got lost, and somebody opened his mail, which UPS came out and just said, actually, we found your package. And yeah, it fell out of the package because you didn't seal it properly. Nobody stole this thing. They found the documents. And Tucker then yesterday admits, well, actually, I did make copies of it. So I did have the documents. But he's trying to make like this sort of scandal, like somebody at UPS is trying to keep you from learning the truth. And UPS, God bless him, came out and said, screw you. That's not true.
He didn't actually say UPS. First of all, he said
he wouldn't tell them, but UPS was the company.
He darkly implied that it wasn't UPS that did it. It was like some bad actor. Yeah, exactly. Who somehow gained,
infiltrated
access to the sorting facility and was able to. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, like they would actually be looking for something like that. You know how many packages probably go to Fox News every single day at a UPS facility? It's not like somebody's going through leafing around. Oh, I found the flash drive. Trying to make this into a scandal. And here's the great part. Tucker then goes on to his show yesterday and admits, well, okay, they did find it. I did actually have copies. And he said, most of the stuff that I have is like some personal stuff about Hunter Biden. He's a troubled guy. We shouldn't really pile on Hunter Biden anymore. I'm like, okay, after you've been jumping on him for the last 5 months, talking about how crooked he is, now you're going to take this approach. Like, he's a troubled guy. You know what? What that tells me is that you don't have anything. There is nothing there. And this guy that came forward, he's a winner. And I mean, it just, I love the fact that they tried to shove this misinformation campaign down our throats a few days before the election, like they did in 2016, and nobody took the bait, with the exception of the New York Post and the hacks that are on at night on Fox News.
Did you read Ben Smith's column in the New York Times, breaking this whole thing down?
Yeah,
it was really interesting, and I think Ben Smith was with BuzzFeed for a long time. I think he's got a lot of credibility. He was writing about the return of gatekeeping in journalism, and he's got a lot of credibility on this, I think, because he was with an organization for a long time that pushed back against the traditional notion of media gatekeeping, that said that gatekeeping was sort of a condescending imposition, that elites had access to information that they used to base all sorts of decisions on, and that they reported on the Steele dossier because they said it was common knowledge and should be shared with people because everyone in the inner circle knew of it. And so Ben Smith isn't necessarily a champion of the return of gatekeeping, but I think he does a great job of analyzing the role that media organizations are supposed to play in evaluating a piece of information before reporting it. And we've been slow to catch up on this. I mean, there's no question about this. We moved from an environment, in the last 20 years where if we didn't publicize a given piece of information, it had a very limited reach, to an environment where anyone can publicize a piece of information with a lot of times a broader reach than many media organizations do. And there is a well, people are talking about this, so do we need to report it? Everyone already knows it. If we don't report it, do we look like we're simply not keeping pace with the flow of information? And I think that has led, not through any malfeasance or intent to harm, but just in an effort to understand what our role is in this new technological landscape, has led to a lot of stuff getting page room that didn't necessarily deserve it. And this is Smith makes this really compelling case that this is a fascinating, this is what newspapers are supposed to do, is they get a story, The column is about how this story was peddled to the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal couldn't corroborate, and was working to corroborate it. Didn't meet the Trump administration's timeline, and so the Trump administration went. The proxies of the administration rather went to the Post, and so this is what we're supposed to do. Is we're supposed to vet information, and when we try to vet a piece of information and can't substantiate it, it doesn't mean that we're engaged in a conspiracy to suppress information. It means that we're shifting back toward not printing. And also, I just want to say, just because we can't corroborate something does not mean it's not true, but.
It wasn't just that these were pieces that could not be corroborated. There were red flags galore about.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
this whole thing is falling apart, though. And you look at it, and I mean, clearly this information was being peddled all over the place. People were trying to get somebody to bite on this. And of course, Rudy Giuliani would be the guy that would do it. This stuff's been floating around for a long time. It's not just these documents that this guy had. Somebody got this laptop. The story about how the laptop came into their possession is changing all the time. Basically, they bought some information from the Russians and some Ukrainian dudes, and they're trying to put it out there and make it look like they somehow legitimately got this material. And it's all falling apart.
The blind computer repair guy. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was fascinating that the Wall Street Journal's opinion page ran with the story, and then their news side debunked it.
Yes.
And as an opinion writer, I gotta say, I don't ever want to be at war with the news side of my operation.
We talked about that last week. The Journal's definitely having a little internal turmoil over there, but it's not a bad thing. But either way, I mean, Tucker Carlson just looked like an idiot last night and the day before with this kind of stuff. And I mean, the great thing was the first response that I saw on Twitter to this when he put this thing out, the dog ate my homework. Everybody's like, yeah, I bet you got a girlfriend in Canada too, Tucker. It was one of those things. You don't know her. She's in Canada. Yeah. So, go ahead, Allan.
It's an interesting debate. And I mean, with Twitter and Facebook getting involved and stuff like that. And you see some of the journalists who see themselves as sort of the truth seekers, like Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi, or however you pronounce his name, and they're kind of beating the drum, and they're very bothered that it's been controlled by Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. And I have mixed feelings about that, but in some ways, it's a publishing platform, and in some way, Facebook and Twitter have some responsibility. It's their publishing platform, and it is. I mean, it's looked at as the public's publishing platform. It's a mixed thing, but I think if all this bomb had been dropped 3 months ago, it would have given the media some time to dig into it, to verify. But it's so dangerous, so close to the election, that if we just go with it and then we find out a month afterwards that it was some fake material, and
they were hoping for the October surprise. I mean, if it had been a June surprise, it might have gone somewhere. But
half the people had already voted by the time it dropped. I mean, so you need September surprises now, not October. You can't do it in October anymore.
Right.
All right. Well, go ahead, Doc.
Oh, I was going to say that the bigger issue here isn't even just about editorial responsibility and gatekeeping. I honestly think it's about the issues with algorithmic sorting and the fact that on Twitter and Facebook, you have a system that is created to perpetuate clicks. And all of this is for ad revenue. And the structure of that system operates at a far larger, more scaled level than any newsroom can. And so, it doesn't really, I hate to say it, but it doesn't really matter at this point as much whether or not we can verify information, because it's already traveled so far before it's debunked. And the debunking will probably never hit as many eyes as that information has traveled. And so really the level of governance here isn't on Twitter and Facebook to say we're going to include or disinclude. It really is on Twitter and Facebook to change the way that their algorithms work and rethink a lot of the way the business model operates if we're really going to get a hold of this problem of misinformation and disinformation.
I think, obviously what you're saying is right about the way information travels, but I kind of wonder if things are swinging. So sort of in the first few months of the pandemic, we saw that searches for, their search for the early search in the early stages of the pandemic was like COVID, coronavirus information, just all the terms you would think of. But then we saw that search started to change to free coronavirus, free press. Like people were specifically looking for free press reporting on COVID-19 because, you could probably come up with another interpretation for that, but I like to think that, actually, I don't know if you could, that people knew that we would have the reliable information and that what we were reporting that would be accurate, and as opposed to whatever else is floating out there. So I do think there is still, I believe there is still, I mean, of course you have different audiences who are going to respond different ways, but there is still, I think that there is still some belief that we have a responsibility to present more accurate information.
Who's the optimist? Who's the optimist now?
I got search data, Craig.
I'll say I agree with you that there is still a responsibility to do it. But part of what that search data suggests is a huge selection bias. You're not seeing all the people who just took what they found online and believed it. You're just looking for people who actually want real information. So,
but that number grew. But that number
you don't see.
But that number did grow. As I say, like at first it was like not popping up in search as a thing people were looking for at all. And then it expanded. So you're right. No, you're right. Because there's definitely different populations of people who are just never going to seek out the free press on what we say, or who are going to just disbelieve anything we say. But there's, I think there is, I don't know. And also Facebook and Twitter, like I don't know about their response to this particular thing. It seems like very heavy-handed, and I only wish that they took the threats against women and people of color that are lobbed on the not even daily, the secondly, as seriously as this, because that is a huge problem with their platforms.
Twitter, I spend a lot of time on Twitter just because there's a lot of news that breaks on Twitter. You find things out pretty quickly, but it is a cesspool. I mean, it's a couple of steps above 4chan, I guess, but it's not a great place these days.
I received a message, a Facebook message from a stranger who told me to go to hell, you liberal C word, and I reported it to Facebook, and they told me that it was not abuse, and that not everything that's upsetting is abuse.
Oh, that's nice of them.
I'd actually say the reverse. It wasn't upsetting. I don't know this stranger. They don't have the power to upset me, but it is abuse to be called obscenities by a stranger.
Well,
anyway,
it is, and
so Facebook's culpable too.
In our line of work, these are things that unfortunately happen quite often. I've had many a death threat over the course of my career for something that I said on the show, or something that I actually had the guts to report on. I think back to a series we did on right-wing extremism about 10 years ago, and lots of hate mail, lots of threats, all that fun stuff came in. And it is there, and it's not acceptable, but it is there. And I think there's going to be some sort of a reckoning for these social media companies in the next few years, whether they like it or not. I think there's some regulation coming their way, because the government is going to want to get their fingers in there and figure it out. But we shall see. All right, we do need to move on to Schmuck of the Week, because that is something that we like to do here. And I was going to nominate the Detroit News for not having a spine, but I don't necessarily want to go after my friends at the Detroit News, because I do have a lot of friends that work there. But come on, Nolan, you got to pick somebody. Pick somebody. I mean, last time, at least you picked Gary Johnson, and you didn't want to go for Trump, and you didn't want to go for Hillary Clinton. I get that. At least you put somebody on there. Have a spine. Make a choice, because we're all forced to make choices in this election cycle. Everybody's got to vote. You can choose not to if you want to, but we're all making our choice as to who we want to be the president. And if you think there's somebody out there that's going to be better, put a name on it. That's what papers do. People look to these things for guidance sometimes. You guys, free press, put your opinion out there. You did it, Nancy. You put your opinion out there.
Waiting for their endorsement.
I mean,
I wasn't looking for guidance from them.
I think
that's not my schmuck nominee, but anyway,
okay,
go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say, and Nancy and I may differ on this, but I think that newspaper endorsements are a relic of the 20th century, and they're okay. I don't object to them, but I also think that the amount of attention that's paid to them is a little out of proportion.
So
how hard is it to sit there and go, you know what, Donald Trump's a bad dude?
Two quick things. Number one, I get inundated with requests from the time absentee ballots drop to when are our endorsements coming out. So people do still care. Okay. Number two, it's not just the endorsement, it's the argument for the endorsement that's important. And we don't just say vote for this person or that when we show our work, and you can agree or disagree with us. And number three, I had a third point. It was really good. People pay attention to stuff like president and governor endorsements. Those are the most sought after. I would argue they're the ones where we have the least ability to move the needle. People don't and not right. most sought after by readers. They care the most. But I think the ones that are really important where we actually have an impact are judicial races, ballot proposals, state legislative candidates, and also in part because just the ability to cover those races deeply, it just doesn't exist the way it did. And I think that those are the ones that are most significant. I mean, I have to check our judicial endorsements. If we didn't do endorsements, I wouldn't know.
I agree. I agree with Nancy on that. Is that, I mean, for president, governor, senator, I don't know that really. But for proposal N, for whatever, I'm always looking to see what the arguments are, and for judicial races and things that I don't know a lot about, or the executive or whatever it might be.
I'm making no endorsement on proposal N because I'm a little bit too close to that subject, and so therefore I should stay away from that. Dr. El-Sayed and I, crossed paths back in those early days of the demolition program in the city of Detroit. So proposal N, hey, Detroiters, you're on your own with that one.
You can find all our endorsements at freep.com.
There you go. All right. Schmuck of the week. We got to do this. Who wants to go first this week with their nominee? Nancy, you had a good one. I'm going to let you go first, Nancy Derringer.
Oh, okay. I am going with the Iosco County Commission, or at least the 4 members of it who this week voted to impeach Gretchen Whitmer. Iosco County is, of course, more or less up north, and it's rural, and it's very conservative. But I think that we have seen the wages of this sort of rhetoric that we need to impeach the governor for, her public health orders. In this kidnapping plot. And I think this is the time. I hate to use this term, this slang term, because it gets on my nerves, but it's time for these guys to take a seat. So,
well, it's like, how much of a tyrannical situation is there up there? There's nowhere to go anyway.
Well, well, it's entirely possible to feel bad for the small businesses that have, had to close, and some of them have had to close permanently. Hey, I get it. I absolutely get it. But until Michigan counties have gates on them where you can actually literally keep people out, we're going to have to treat these things like a statewide. We have to treat COVID as a statewide problem because, as Dr. El-Sayed put so eloquently at the beginning of the program, it's everywhere now. And so we can't pretend that the Upper Peninsula is a different country.
All right. Who wants to go next with their schmuck nominee?
Okay. I normally don't like calling people schmucks.
I understand that, but
I'm going to say everyone who doesn't vote is a schmuck. You got to vote for all the reasons you already know, but also I'm worried about Allan. The man is in bed in a tracksuit. We got to get him. We got to do better by Allan. So vote so that Allan can buddy.
Thank you.
Doesn't look like a Russian.
Buddy, call me if you need to talk, buddy.
All right, Doc, you got anybody?
Donald Trump Jr. Could go for the real deal, but the Jr. is even worse. I was going to say Little Wayne. Couldn't even get normal size Wayne endorsed, but Donald Trump Jr. who went on Fox News and said that that deaths are almost nothing, despite the fact that we're hitting nearly 1,000 deaths to COVID-19 a day. And when you belittle the people who are lost, you belittle their family members. And this is not about politicizing a virus. This is about fighting a public health scourge. And clearly he is on the wrong side of that. And because of my optimism, inshallah, I'm going to say he's going to be on the wrong side of the election in just a couple days too.
All right, Allan Lengel.
So, I'm going to go. I was going to say Lindsey Graham again because he's still shamelessly soliciting on Fox News money. And he made an appearance the other day where he did it in the beginning asking for money. And at the end, he was asking for it again and they cut him off. But I would say David Perdue, Senator David Perdue in Georgia, who is just a schmuck. And I don't know if you saw any of the debate. With,
he got his butt handed to him.
John Ossoff, but he just ripped them and said, "You are sure you're not concerned about COVID because you're more concerned about the federal investigation into your stocks." And he just went on to call him a crook and all that stuff. And the senator said nothing. He just looked paralyzed by the attack. So hopefully this will be his last term.
Well, I was going to nominate the city councilman in Warren who showed up for his arraignment yesterday after he handcuffed a woman who was putting Black Lives Matter stickers on Trump signs. He showed up at his arraignment wearing his military police uniform. Of course, he's retired. You can do that, but obviously trying to get some sort of sympathy from the judge. But this guy, first of all, suggesting that he was acting within his authority as a former military police person to take this woman into custody. Come on now. Warren does Warren better than any other town. So they're going to be up there. So that was one of my nominees. The other nominee is Republicans in the U.S. Senate, for basically suggesting that they are not going to work on any COVID relief deal as people need help right now. They have walked off the job once again, proving that they are incapable of governing. The only thing that the Republicans have ever been good at is packing the courts and making rich people richer. That is the only thing they have ever successfully gotten through Congress since the days of Ronald Reagan. They cannot govern when they are in charge. They have way too many internal squabbles. They can't agree that people need help right now, and we're not going to see anything till probably January if we're lucky. And therefore, we've got months of this to go before any kind of relief comes to people in this country. That's enough. That should be enough to make you think about who you're voting for this cycle, because the Republicans, again, time and time again, for decades have shown that they are incapable of governing in any rational capacity. I just can't say it any plainer than that. That's my schmuck.
All right.
That's my schmuck. Well, I think we got to wrap it up, everybody. I appreciate everyone being here. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, thank you very much. We'll have you back for sure. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Nancy Kaffer of the Detroit Free Press. And again, yes, you can find all of their endorsements at freak.com. We appreciate that very much. Nancy Derringer, thank you. Thanks to Allan Lengel. Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering this broadcast today. We always appreciate his help. And again, thanks to Michigan Radio for sponsoring the program and Deadline Detroit. Really do appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everybody. This is all going to be over in a few days. So get out there and vote if you haven't done it. Well, no, there's going to be lots to talk about.
In a few days.
Also, hopefully you don't mean that in sort of the global sense.
No. I just think, at least we're going to know who won in a few days, and that's going to be a big deal.
I need it to be over
accordingly. Yeah. That's the thing. Right now, it's difficult to plan. So anyway, get out there and vote if you haven't done so. Use the Dropbox. It's a good thing. But if you like showing up at the polls, do it. Just do it safely. And remember, everybody, wear a mask. Be responsible. It's not that hard, and it's not about you. It's about everybody else. So with that, I will say goodbye. Have a great weekend. And Allan,
stay home safely. And I do mean that.
Exactly. Most accidents do happen in the home. So we appreciate it, everybody. Have a great weekend.
My name's M.L. Elric. I'm an investigative reporter and a connoisseur of fine yogurts. I know a little bit about Detroit. I know a little bit about deadlines. And I'm asking you to become a member of DeadlineDetroit.com. Like me, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm making a monthly donation. My wife is making a monthly donation. I know that seems redundant, but they need the money, and the money goes to a good place. Getting the story out, getting the truth out. Because if we don't support local journalism, there's some people a couple blocks away from here who are going to get away with a whole bunch of stuff that's going to cost you a whole lot more than just a few bucks out of your pocket every month. Go to DeadlineDetroit.com, become a member. You'll see it's really easy at the top of the website. Give early, give often, give generously. Just give a damn. That's the best way I know how.